Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into a really fundamental concept, something that, well, shapes a lot of how societies are structured. Dantuk. And looking at the material you shared, what's immediately interesting is that it's not just one simple thing, is it? It seems to have layers, especially when you look at it through a Marxist-Leninist viewpoint, and specifically in Vietnam.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, the source material unpacks Dantuk in two really key ways. So sometimes it means the whole group, you know, the entire population of a country, the nation.
Okay, the big picture.
Exactly. Think of Dantuk as the nation, like say India or China or Vietnam as a whole. But then it also zooms in, if you like, to talk about the specific ethnic communities within those nations.
Ah, okay.
So in that sense, Dantuk means ethne. Like in Vietnam, you've got the 54 distinct ethnic groups of the Kin majority, but also the Thai, the Hmong, the Khmer, many others.
Right. Okay, let's dig into that first meaning then. The big one. Dantuk as nation. What are the sort of core ingredients? What makes a whole bunch of different people become a Dantuk on that national scale?
Well, the material lays out 5 main characteristics for that national sense of Dantuk. First off, a shared stable territory.
Land.
Yes, but it's, more than just lines on a map. It's the actual space where the community lives, survives. And it becomes this powerful symbol tied to sovereignty.
The homeland.
Exactly. The source even mentions this newer idea with globalization of maybe soft borders defined by culture, but the core is that connection to a physical place and, well, the duty to protect it.
Makes sense. So territory is number 1. What's next?
The second one, and the source really emphasizes this from its materialist standpoint, is a shared mode of economic activity.
The economy.
Yes. And it's seen as perhaps the most crucial characteristic because the economic structure, the way people produce and exchange things, that's what really binds the members together, creates stability, creates those shared interests.
So it's not just feelings of togetherness, it's the practical stuff, the economic engine holding it together.
That's the argument presented, yes.
Yeah.
That a strong economic community is really essential for a group to become a Dantuk in this national sense. It's the material base.
Okay, fascinating. Territory, economy.
Yeah.
What about just, well, talking to each other?
Absolutely vital. The third characteristic is a shared language for communication.
Common language.
Yeah, spoken, written, both. It's the tool for, well, everything. Business, government, personal stories, building relationships, all of it. The source notes that even in countries with lots of different ethnic languages like Vietnam, there's always a common unified national language. Consistent grammar, core vocabulary everyone can use.
Right, you need that common ground for understanding. So what about the less tangible things? Shared values, maybe? A national character?
That brings us straight to the fourth characteristic. A shared culture and psychology.
Okay.
This is where you get into that shared psychology, the national character, customs, habits, the overall lifestyle. It all combines to create that unique identity, that sort of collective us. And the source points out a really strong connection between this overarching national culture and the individual cultures of the different ethnic communities within the nation.
So they influence each other.
Definitely. It even suggests that, rejecting core national cultural values could lead someone to feel separate from the national community. But it also stresses the importance of cultural exchange while still holding on to that central national identity.
Interesting balance. Belonging to the big group, but keeping your own flavor. So what's the final piece for Dantuk as nation?
The fifth one is a shared state, a national state.
A government.
Essentially, yes. It means everyone belonging to that broader Dantuk, including all the ethnic communities inside it, they're all governed by one independent state. And this is really key. It distinguishes the nation state from the individual ethnic groups within it, because those groups don't have their own state in that same sense.
Right, they're part of the larger state.
Exactly. And the nature of that state, its political system, shapes the nation, and it's what represents the Dantuk internationally.
Okay, let's quickly recap the nation side. We've got shared territory, shared economy, shared language, shared culture and psychology, and a shared state. And they're all interconnected, right? Not just a checklist.
Precisely. They all influence and reinforce each other.
Okay, so now let's flip the coin. Let's look at that other meaning Dantuk as ethne, the specific ethnic communities within the nation.
Right. the individual slices of the pie, as you put it earlier.
Yeah. So what defines them? What makes an ethnic community a Dantuk in this narrower sense?
Here, the source highlights 3 core characteristics. First, a community of language.
Language again, but maybe more specific.
Yes, it could be a shared spoken language, maybe written too, or sometimes just the spoken form. It's a really fundamental way to distinguish one ethnic group from another, and it's often something the groups themselves value very highly, work to preserve.
Makes sense.
Though the text does note that, over time, groups might adopt other languages. It's not necessarily fixed forever.
Okay. So language is a key marker. What else sets these ethnic communities apart?
Second is a community of culture.
Right. Traditions, customs.
Exactly. Both the tangible stuff like clothing, crafts, buildings, and the intangible things, traditions, lifestyle, beliefs, religion, customs. The source really links the development of these groups to their unique cultural traditions. And similar to the national level, there's often a strong drive today to preserve these distinct ethnic cultures, even while engaging in cultural exchange.
So keeping those unique ways of life going. And the third factor for defining an ethne.
The third one, and the source calls this the most critical factor, is ethnic self-awareness.
Self-awareness. How does that work for a group?
It's the group's own conscious understanding of themselves. Knowing their shared origins, their specific ethnic name, what they call themselves, and this ongoing sense, this affirmation that they exist as a distinct group and intend to continue, regardless of changes in where they live or outside influences.
So it's that internal sense of belonging together.
Exactly. It connects right into their ethnic consciousness, their shared feelings, their group psychology. It's that internal glue.
Okay. So for the ethne, it's community of language, community of culture, and this vital ethnic self-awareness. These 3 things give them their cohesion.
That's the idea presented. They ensure stability within each ethnic group.
Now, how do these 2 meanings, nation and ethne, fit together? You said they're inseparable.
Yes, the source really stresses that. They're deeply interconnected. The nation state, that broader sense, is essentially made up of these different ethnic communities.
Right.
And conversely, these ethnic communities exist within and they contribute to the larger nation state.
So, thinking about Vietnam again, you can't fully grasp the Vietnamese nation without understanding the 54 ethnic communities.
Right.
And you can't fully understand those communities without seeing them in the context of the larger Vietnamese nation. 2 sides of the same coin.
Precisely put. And this relationship is really where the Marxist-Leninist perspective on the national question, which the source details, comes into focus. It offers a framework based on historical materialism for understanding how these concepts develop and interact.
Okay, so this framework sees material conditions, economic forces as key drivers.
Yes. That's the underlying theoretical basis. It views these as primary drivers shaping nations and ethnic groups.
So the text mentions Lenin identified 2 key trends in how national relations evolve. Kind of opposing forces, but linked.
That's right, 2 objective trends. The first is this tendency, this desire for populations to, separate, to secede and form their own independent national communities.
The drive for independence.
Exactly. The analysis points to the awakening of national consciousness, that self-awareness we just discussed, and the desire for self-determination as the main drivers. Think about the anti-colonial movements, people wanting to break free and form their own nations.
Right, that makes sense. Wanting control over your own destiny. What's the second trend Lenin identified?
The second trend is sort of the opposite pole. It's the desire of nations, both existing ones and those forming, to unite, to come together, both within countries and across borders.
Okay, so pulling apart and coming together. Why the second trend?
This became really noticeable, according to the analysis, during the imperialist stage of capitalism. You had the growth of industry, science, technology, more economic and cultural exchange, and all this created a kind of need to break down national barriers, to foster closer ties.
Interesting. So one force pushing for separation, another pushing for integration. How do we see these trends playing out today?
Well, within a single multi-ethnic nation, that first trend might look like different ethnic groups striving for more freedom, equality, prosperity within the nation. The second trend is seen in efforts to strengthen unity and harmony among those groups, better economic ties, cultural understanding, social cohesion.
And
Internationally, that first drive for self-determination is still there in movements for national liberation or asserting independence from external influence. The second trend is pretty obvious, isn't it? Regional alliances, economic blocs, global cooperation efforts between nations.
There's this constant push and pull, and the source warns about upsetting the balance between them.
Yes, it emphasizes their dialectical unity, they're opposing but connected. Disrupting that balance can lead to instability. The text also mentions how these trends can be exploited politically, referencing the concept of peaceful evolution.
Peaceful evolution. What does that mean in this context?
Within this specific political framework, it generally refers to perceived strategies aimed at subtly undermining a political system or national unity, often through cultural or ideological means, rather than direct force, exploiting those tensions we talked about.
Okay. Now, based on these trends, the Marxist-Leninist approach developed a specific program for the national question. What are its core principles?
It basically rests on three main pillars, all interconnected. First, the complete equality of nations.
Equality.
Yes, seen as a fundamental right. Doesn't matter how big or small, how developed. Equal rights, equal obligations, and everything. No special privileges for any nation. And crucially, it prohibits any form of national oppression or exploitation, both within societies and between nations.
And this needs to be real, not just on paper.
Exactly. The source stresses it needs legal backing, but more importantly, practical implementation, which in this view requires getting rid of class oppression too, and fighting racism and extreme nationalism.
Okay, equality first. What's the second principle?
The second is the right of nations to self-determination.
We touched on this. The right to choose your own path.
Precisely. The right to freely decide your own destiny, political system, development path. And this explicitly includes the option to secede and form an independent state, or the right to voluntarily unite with other nations, but based on equality.
But there was a catch, wasn't there? A nuance.
A very important one. The source insists that exercising this right has to be based on concrete realities and significantly viewed from the standpoint of the working class, ensuring national interests align with broader working class interests and social progress. Lenin apparently focused heavily on this right for oppressed colonial nations.
And the source also made a clear distinction about who this applies to, right?
Yes, this is critical. The right to national self-determination in this framework is not seen as the same as giving ethnic minorities within an existing multi-ethnic state some automatic right to just break away.
Oh.
The source warns against reactionary forces or external powers misusing the concept to interfere in a country's internal affairs or stir up separatism. The focus is really on the self-determination of a whole nation, especially emerging from colonialism and not necessarily fragmenting established states.
That's a really key clarification. So equality, self-determination. What's the third pillar?
The third is the union of workers of all nations.
Worker solidarity across borders.
Exactly. It highlights what's seen as the fundamental link between national liberation and class liberation, connecting patriotism with genuine internationalism. The idea is that solidarity among working people everywhere is the basis for uniting all ethnicities in the fight against imperialism, for national independence, for social progress. It's seen as both a core principle and a practical strategy, linking the whole program together.
So uniting the struggles and this whole three-part program, equality, self-determination, worker unity, this is the theoretical toolkit, basically.
That's how it's presented, yes. The theoretical foundation for communist parties to formulate national policies, both during struggles for independence and then during socialist construction.
Right. Okay, let's bring this back home, specifically to Vietnam. The source outlines 6 key characteristics of Vietnam as a multi-ethnic nation. What stands out?
Well, first, there's a huge difference in population size between the ethnic groups.
We mentioned the 54 groups, but the kin are the vast majority.
That's right, over 85%. Only 6 other groups have over 1 million people. But then you have 11 groups with fewer than 5,000 people. The Oki are the smallest, just a few hundred.
Wow, that's a massive disparity.
It is, and obviously that presents challenges for the smaller groups in maintaining their languages, their cultures, their ways of life. The text notes the Vietnamese party and state pay special attention to them.
Okay, population disparity. What's another key feature?
Second is how the groups live together. It's a pattern of interspersed residence.
Meaning they're all mixed up geographically.
Pretty much. Because Vietnam's been a migration crossroads for centuries, people settled in a very interwoven way. You don't find large areas belonging exclusively to one minority group.
Pros and cons to that, I imagine.
Definitely. The source mentions advantages like more understanding, cultural exchange, contributing to that unity and diversity, but the downside can be potential for local friction or making areas more vulnerable to, divisive influences.
Okay, mixed settlement, third characteristic.
This one's about location, the strategic importance of the areas where most ethnic minorities live.
How so?
Even though they're a smaller part of the total population, the 53 minority groups tend to live in areas vital for the whole country. Think border regions, islands, remote highlands, areas crucial for the economy, like resources, but also for national security, defense, and the environment.
Right, borders, resources, ecology.
And the text adds another layer. Some groups have family and cultural ties across the border in neighboring countries, which, it notes, can sometimes be exploited by hostile forces.
Adds complexity. What about development levels? Are they all at the same stage?
No, that's the fourth characteristic, uneven development. There are significant gaps in economic, cultural, and social development among the different ethnic groups.
Gaps in what ways?
Differences in economic opportunities, access to education, healthcare, even things like traditional social structures or how involved they are in the modern economy. Some might rely more on traditional practices, others are more integrated into industry. The source makes it clear that reducing these gaps is seen as essential for real national equality and is a major focus of state policy for these areas.
Trying to level the playing field somewhat. What's the fifth characteristic?
This one's about history, a long-standing tradition of solidarity and unity among all the Vietnamese ethnic groups.
Where does that come from?
The source argues it formed early on, partly from the shared need to deal with nature, but crucially from centuries of resisting foreign invaders together. That shared struggle forged really strong bonds.
So unity as a historical necessity, almost.
That's the perspective. It's presented as a precious tradition, a key factor in Vietnam's historical successes, and still vital today for building and defending the country. Requires vigilance against division, the text says.
That shared history seems critical.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final characteristic.
The sixth point ties back to culture. It highlights the unique cultural identities of each ethnic group and how all these distinct cultures contribute to one unified but very diverse Vietnamese national culture.
The mosaic idea again?
Exactly. While each group has its own unique traditions, language, arts, there's an underlying unity born from that shared history of nation building and defense, and an early sense of being one independent nation.
So these six characteristics, population disparity, mixed settlements, strategic locations, uneven development, historical unity, and cultural diversity within unity, they really paint the picture of why ethnic issues are so central in Vietnam.
Precisely. They explain why the party and state see it as such a major, ongoing socio-political issue, deeply connected to their overall goals for the country's development, especially in the transition towards socialism.
Okay, that leads us right into the specific viewpoints and policies of the Vietnamese party and state. Let's start with the party's overall perspective. What are the guiding principles?
Well, the source stresses consistency, adhering to those fundamental Marxist-Leninist principles on the national question since the party's beginning. They see the national question and building national unity as strategically vital, based on both history and the current world situation.
So it's a top priority.
Absolutely. It mentions the 12th National Congress specifically affirming the strategic role of ethnic unity and the need to keep improving policies to ensure equality, respect, solidarity, harmony, mutual development, and crucially tackling those development gaps in minority areas. There's also emphasis on oversight and fighting discrimination or division.
Can you maybe summarize the core viewpoints?
Sure, basically. National question and unity are strategic, long-term, but also urgent. All ethnic groups are equal, united, supportive, working together towards industrialization, modernization, socialism, with strong opposition to any division. Comprehensive development, political, economic, cultural, social security in ethnic and mountainous regions is key, linking economic growth with social progress and good ethnic policies. Developing human resources and preserving cultural values are important. Prioritizing investment in these regions, infrastructure, poverty reduction, sustainable use of resources, promoting self-reliance, but also central support. And finally, ethnic affairs are everybody's job. The party, people, army, all levels of government, the whole system.
Wow, that is comprehensive. So how does that translate into actual policies? Let's look at the different areas, starting with politics.
Politically, the focus is on equality, unity, respect, mutual development, enhancing political participation for everyone, especially making sure ethnic minorities are engaged and understand the importance of unity for the country's overall goals: independence, socialism, prosperity, democracy, civilization.
And economically, what's the approach?
It's geared towards boosting socioeconomic development, specifically in the mountainous and ethnic minority areas, trying to harness their potential, but also systematically closing those development gaps with the rest of the country. This happens through targeted programs, projects, all within that socialist-oriented market economy framework, with special attention to remote, border, and old revolutionary base areas.
Okay. And culture. How do they approach preserving diversity while building a national culture?
The policy aims to build an advanced Vietnamese culture, rich in national identity, but also actively preserve and promote the unique traditional cultures of all 54 groups. So supporting minority languages, grassroots cultural life, raising cultural levels, training cultural workers from minority groups, creating supportive environments, international exchange, but also combating social problems and what's termed peaceful evolution in the cultural sphere.
Right. What about social policies? Health, education, welfare?
Socially, the goal is ensuring social security, gradually achieving more social equality and justice. This links back to the economic development, poverty reduction programs, but also specific policies on population, health, education that are tailored to the specific conditions of different regions and groups. Strengthening grassroots political systems and organizations in these areas is also part of it.
And finally, security and defense in these often sensitive regions.
Policies there focus on strengthening overall national defense by ensuring political stability and social order locally. It involves close coordination between different forces, improving civil-military relations, and building a people's defense posture that fits the specific context of ethnic minority areas.
So it really is interconnected across all these fields. The source seems to say you can't just focus on one thing.
Exactly. Successful implementation requires that comprehensive, integrated approach across politics, economy, culture, society, security, especially in those ethnic minority, border, mountainous, and island regions.
And the overall philosophy behind this policy.
The source concludes by emphasizing its comprehensive nature. Socioeconomic development is seen as the foundation for unity and equality, for overcoming those disparities. The policy itself is described as revolutionary, progressive, humane, inclusive, rejecting discrimination and division, and aiming to build on the internal strength of each group while fostering mutual support across the whole nation.
Well, this has certainly been a real deep dive into Dan talk. We've unpacked the two meanings, nation, ethne, looked at their characteristics, the Marxist-Leninist framework presented in the source, and then grounded it all in Vietnam-specific contexts and policies. Hopefully for everyone listening, this has been a useful shortcut to understanding a complex topic, maybe sparked a few aha moments about just how intricate national and ethnic identity can be.
I hope so. And, it leaves us with a pretty interesting question to ponder, doesn't it?
What's that?
Well, thinking about this constant interplay, this tension between the desire for distinct ethnic identity and the forces pushing for national unity, what are the biggest challenges and maybe opportunities facing multi-ethnic nations today in the 21st century?
That's a big question.
It is. How do these concepts we've discussed, play out elsewhere, in different countries, different contexts, beyond just Vietnam? Something definitely worth thinking about.